So we're so thrilled to have this panel this morning about urban environmental stewardship and community voices. And so as you can see, we're joined by the wonderful Miss Carol from Philly Thrive, as well as Brooke Solomon from Philly Thrive, and Krista Barfield from FarmerJawn. So we have some wonderful panelists, and the purpose of this discussion is to understand how media has been supportive in your existing efforts to raise issues of the environment, and how environmental issues are currently framed in the media. So I would first like to begin by giving some space for our panelists to introduce themselves, their organizations, and possibly some examples of how their organizations are currently utilizing media in their advocacy. So Krista, would you like to begin by introducing yourself and FarmerJawn?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Krista Barfield. I am the CEO and founder of FarmerJawn Agriculture. We are a multi-site, 128-acre working farm across 3 counties in Pennsylvania. We're also the largest Black-owned food producer that grows produce specifically in the state of Pennsylvania. And really what I focus on is not just growing food, but doing so regeneratively and organically in a way that the earth takes care of us and we take care of the planet. So it's really a symbiotic relationship that we're stewarding and fostering and while we're growing food at the same time, and helping people get back to the basics of understanding where their food comes from and where the genesis of health actually is, and that is food. And we do our part in really leveraging the skill sets that we have in the messaging and the platform that we've been able to build over the last 6 years of the existence of FarmerJawn, to be able to share with people, specifically Black and Brown, but that has definitely transformed to so many people needing to understand where their food comes from and why it impacts their health directly. So.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Brooke, did you want to introduce yourself? And I know you also had some visual aids.
Let me share so that Carol can also see.
Hi, I'm Brooke Solomon. I'm the interim communications coordinator at Philly Thrive. Been a volunteer with Philly Thrive for 5 years, and I'm recently in a staff role. And I'm joined by Carol Foy. Carol, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Carol Foy, and I am a member of Philly Thrive. I sit on the board in Philly Thrive. I am the not communication coordinator, whatever it is. I am in membership. I'm a little nervous this morning. Sorry about that. But I do a lot in Philly Thrive. I do a lot of stuff in Philly Thrive. I do that I like, especially being on the board, especially on the high committee and stuff like that. Yeah, but I do a lot in membership, stuff like that. I am the convener for the membership circle. That I am. I'm the convener for the membership circle. So I do a lot. Thank you for letting me be here today, and thank you for letting me share. And I'll be right back. My other phone is ringing. I let my phone.
So Philly Thrive was founded in, I think like 2015? Yeah. And we're a base building group, and we plan strategic campaigns to address the environmental hazards in South Philadelphia and the disproportionate effects on Black and Brown people in South Philadelphia. You can go to the next slide. So in 2016, we started because the PES oil refinery was planning to expand to the South Street Seaport, to Southport, which is actually being considered again right now. And we had this one action that really leveraged us, which we just put a bunch of Post-it notes outside of the Philadelphia Regional Port Authority office, and that was the thing that we say really got them to listen to us. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. And then in 2018, the refinery exploded, and it wasn't the first explosion of the refinery. It's been in existence for 150 years, but it was the last one because after that, the refinery was shut down. You can go to the next slide. And so we led a bunch of. We were already on a campaign to shut down the refinery when this happened, and then there were a series of meetings with the mayor's office that they put on to try and evaluate what should happen with the refinery. Eventually, they had a bankruptcy auction in New York City that we went to, and so in 2020, it was sold to Hilco Redevelopment Partners, which is a redevelopment group. They redevelop industrial sites across the world. You can go to the next slide. And so since 2020, we've been working on our campaign to try and encourage local jobs, a seat at the table, investment in the community, and a full cleanup of the refinery site. And you can go to the next slide. We also have been working. Oh yeah, so Hilco is like frustrating and challenging to work with, but they also have a lot of power and a lot of possibility there. So we're working hard to make sure that we build a collaborative relationship with Hilco and the community. And there's a lot of different community partners and people to engage, but our main focus is community engagement and input. So we've been trying to encourage Hilco to have public meetings and to have public processes. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. Here's some of our, this is like the aesthetic of the group, like DIY with, you saw the sunflowers earlier. We've got these bright yellow shirts, and we've had some, like, stories are at the core of our work, so we've had some great opportunities for press that, is sometimes good, sometimes medium, but it's a good opportunity. And next slide, yeah. Recently, we started a housing campaign to limit the effects of gentrification on displacement from the community, and our main focus has been on home repairs and trying to make sure that people who own their homes can stay in their homes. And so last year, the state put a $50 million home repair bill that passed, and this year the city passed a $5 million green home repairs budget line. So been slowly but surely adding more to that work.
Great. Thank you so much for both of those introductions. I really admire the work that both of your organizations are pursuing. So to frame some of the discussion that we're going to be having about media successes, the ways that you're using media with your organization, it sounds like there are a variety of roles that your groups have to play in terms of storytelling, in terms of advocacy, advertising for the events and actions that you pursue, education and outreach. So to begin, can you tell us some of the roles that media has played in those functions for your organization, and maybe some strategies that you've had to use for your groups? Krista, do you want to start?
Sure. When I first started using, I would say the first platform that I really began to use in the media space with the company was social media. And it's just an origination point, really. And that was just me being able to talk about what I was doing, that I was growing food. And that's how it all began. I worked in healthcare for 10 years, and I transitioned into agriculture. And not purposely. It kind of was really, I always like to say agriculture found me. And so I know that this is actually my true calling because I wasn't raised farming. I didn't grow up touching soil. So the first time I actually had an introduction to soil was in 2018 while I was in a completely different country. And so meeting Black farmers in Martinique, being inspired and coming home and recognizing that this is something I wanted to do, having also just resigned from my job right before I left for that vacation. So this has evolved so much, and using social media to just share what and why I'm doing what I'm doing has allowed me to also be educated along the way and educate people along the way. So I really always consider FarmerJawn is a ship that I'm building while sailing it, and has been since the beginning. And I really like where it has gone and where it's going. So definitely using Instagram and Facebook as a means to connect with people has been helpful. In my first original article that talked about my tea company, which is the first company I started using herbs that we grew on our farm, was from the Philadelphia Inquirer. So with that article from in March of 2020, things just started to roll from there. And then there were news stories, and then being invited into stations, folks coming to see me, then people reaching out to actually do stories. So, I mean, there's been quite a mixture. And it's really important to when you're speaking with journalists, especially for me, for them to get it right, because there's people always want to tout the black farmer which is important. It's important to tell the story, but tell it for the purpose that benefits us and not just for the benefit of whomever's telling the story, which tends to happen. And so without having too many more run-on sentences, I'd say simply that I've utilized media in the best way that I have seen to benefit the organization and benefit the mission of Regenerative Organic and benefit the mission of people knowing where their food comes from. Because to me, food is medicine, and having that healthcare background, I have felt like I've done a good job working with folks who have reached out to me from media outlets to be able to tell that as our main story.
That's incredible. I was really struck by your introduction when you mentioned the genesis of health being food.
Mm-hmm.
And so hearing that you have this healthcare background that directly informs the work you currently do is amazing.
Indeed.
I also love what you said about you're building you have this ship that you're sailing as you're building it.
Yes.
And so that's also extremely incredible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Brooke, do you have examples or that you want to share, or maybe some of the media strategies that you have pursued? I know that you said you were the communications coordinator as well for Philly Thrive, and what that's looked like.
Yeah, so we are mostly like a Instagram, Facebook. Like we found that like Instagram is a great way to share when it's challenging with a membership organization. Like, do you have your Instagram be a place for the members to engage or for the public to engage? But for the most part, Instagram and Facebook are for the public to engage with, and then we have, more internal communication, political education. But we use our social media for political education, and a lot of people know about events that are happening. But like, especially in 2020, I was going back and looking at our most popular, most engaged with Instagram posts, and the number one was like the 2020 budget process, when the police budget was increasing, but they were cutting a lot of other budget line items. And so, especially in the 2020 moment, there was a lot of engagement with like people wanting to be involved in like political action from home, and it's sort of an interesting line of figuring out what you want from people when they engage with it, whether you want them to just be fired up or be informed or get involved. And so like a lot of the members have shared that just one of the priorities for communications is just letting people know what's happening and changing the pattern where harm is happening and no one knows about it. And so like there are all these sort of understandings of what's happening on an environmental science level. That's like the air smells bad, and we don't necessarily know what exactly is happening there, but we do know that the air smells bad, and making sure that people like are validating that and understanding that, and that then is deeply connected to asthma and cancer in the neighborhood. And yeah, like telling clear stories. I mean, I think our stories are complicated and a little bit less complicated than some other ones, but we like it's been a benefit that we've had clear storytelling from the beginning, and so media has been like interested in engaging with it. And then in 2020 we had a New York Times Magazine cover story, which was after the refinery had exploded, before it had been sold, I think. Maybe after it had been sold. But it was like a many-page review of our work and the environmental racism movement in general. And so that's been like our biggest media moment, but it also just has like allowed us to be a space in the environmental justice field in Philly. And yeah, we're a multiracial, multi-class movement, and so there's sort of like a responsibility that we share to like spreading information and being in solidarity with other groups. And yeah.
Thank you. And you mentioned so many different functions that media has to serve for your organization in terms of community building and thinking through who your audience is, political education. Ms. Carroll, did you have any examples about media strategies or use of media at Philly Thrive that you wanted to share with us?
Well, Brooks shared most of the strategies that we do. Like he said, we shut down the refinery in 2019. We was fighting for the right. But first, we started fighting for the right to breathe campaign in 2015. And we all started in 2015 as a young lady started knocking on, young lady Alexis started knocking on people's doors in 2015 in my area to let them know that we have air pollution in our area, but the benzene and the fossil fuels. So as they started, we did the right to breathe campaign. In 2015, we start going. In 2017, we start going to City Hall. We start going to City Hall. We should go to a prep charter every day. Every day, so like every day, we go to prep charter. We did the dead scene. With Carol Henry was alive. We did the dead scene at prep charter. We had signs written on our chest. Some people had cancer written on their chest, on their around their neck. Some people had asthma. Some people had CODP. And some people other stuff on their chest too. But we done did a lot. We did the Democracy March. We did that. We did the Democracy March before I did. And like Brooke was saying, we fought for gentrification where people could stay in their neighbor, not only stay in their neighborhood, stay in their homes, stay at home because they have a lot of things going on right now where they build houses taller than the house that we live in. And it pushes people out, the rent going up high, so we for people to definitely stay in their homes, so like that. And we're trying to make sure that people get help with their rent, get their homes fixed up. They need the elderly, they need their homes fixed up. We have a program we're trying to start now where we would send people where they could get help with like LAHI, stuff like that. Yeah. But everything we do is really good because we help everybody in our neighborhood, from the young to the old. People in the neighborhood. And right now we doing so they're trying to fix up the park, get the park fixed up, make the park more better for the children and the older adults too, like they did. And I like what Brooke said, that we that it different. They went from different from PES refinery. First it was Sunoco, and before that it was something else back then. Before it came Sunoco, it was another name. And then it changed from that name to Sunoco. That was Sunoco to the Hilco. PS always found that in Hilco. But Sunoco still have a little part in it. They still store with oil and stuff. And so Sunoco do have a little part down the road. They do. The little part of the refinery still, but it's belonged by Sunoco. It is. So, we're doing a lot in our community. Like that. We're doing a lot. I mean, like Brooke said, we want air monitor. We the one air monitor we did. And we help people stay in their home. We help people stay home. We fixed a lady home up named Miss Irene that passed away. They went there, fixed her home up. They did, and I'm quite sure they'll do more homes when they can like they did. So we've been to Harrisburg. I've been to Harrisburg. I have been to Harrisburg. The Harrisburg, and that's where we won the money for the they had people homeless fixed up and stuff. But like Brooke said, we do a lot in Philly. It's a lot we do. We're always busy in meetings and stuff. We do a lot. Helping in the community, even with the children, with the mutual aid do food basket for people that don't have food every Thursday or every other Thursday. They bring food, and I'm in charge of that. Getting names of people that need put their names put on the list, where they could get their name put on the list to have food come to their house. And when they don't want the food no more, they just let me know, and I tell them they remove their name from the list. So we do it. We do a lot. We do a lot in the community. Yes. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carroll. That actually is a perfect transition into my next question, where we were talking about how these issues of urban environmental stewardship, they don't exist in isolation, and oftentimes they're part of these broader movements. So it's not just about pollution, for example, it's about basic human rights. So Ms. Carroll discussed things like children's health, like children deserve having a safe environment and having a secure food source, access to healthy and nutritious foods, and knowing where your food is coming from. Things like mutual aid, and so basic rights and basic things that everyone needs to exist and thrive to be healthy. So can you speak a little bit more about how your work fits into these broader movements and maybe how that influences how you're moving using your media or how you're organizing?
Yeah, absolutely. The lack of all the things you named, really, they stem from trauma, and unmet needs is results in trauma. And so that's what we are experiencing as a people, and like what you stated, it is very much a bipartisan issue. It crosses generational lines, gender lines, all of it. Like everybody is impacted, and so the work that we do, it really is about, again, going back to storytelling and why the storytelling is so important to ensure that there's not a lot of greenwashing happening, which tends to be the case. A lot of organizations, whether they be local or multinationals, that are wanting to be a part of telling the story to basically tout their company and to give themselves the advantage, without really being for the people. And so it really does come down to recognizing that there are simple needs that people as humans need to be met so that all the other things really fall in place. And I always look at as food definitely being one of the in the hierarchy, food being at that bottom, because in order for us to get to the top, we have to make sure that we have that at least. And so our soil, everything starts at the soil level. Our air quality is directly impacted by the health of our soil, our food quality as well, our water quality as well. Everything is impacted by soil health. And so I love the idea of making sure that we also are feeding people, because that's always, like, hunger is a multi-billion-dollar business, probably trillions of dollar business is what hunger is. And so when I think about that and how the exploitation of people, hungry people, to line the pockets of corporations, it comes back to, again, where is that food coming from? Because it's not enough to just provide food for folks. If we're, a lot of food banks as well. I feel like some are wanting to do a better job of understanding where their food is coming from. But I am not a proponent of giving away food to a food bank. That I and my team were very diligent in not growing with any chemicals. I believe that these multi-million-dollar food banks, that's what their revenues are, should be investing in working with farmers so that we can really say that the impact, so they can actually prove the impact, because the impact is not just to feeding that person, it's also to keeping farmers in business so that the food system can be complete and can be won. So that's just an example of how it really should work.
Thank you so much. Brooke, did you have some examples?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, like, with the, with the, with the No Arena in Chinatown efforts, like, I think there's persistently sort of alignment across the city about the concerns that people are having, and gentrification has obviously been a big concern in the last 5 years, and displacement and concerns about, like, being able to stay in place if you want, and if like you as a community wants to. And like it's an interesting opportunity for our membership that is both like people who maybe are not from Philadelphia and people who have been living in the same neighborhood for multiple generations, to have this like exchange and and growth opportunities of like both being in solidarity with cross city movement work like the No Arena and like whenever we have these budget processes to try and talk with other groups in the city. And also like I think like gun violence is a very like the interest people have and investment people have in addressing gun violence is a very like separated issue. And being an organization that wants to address that head on and see that as part of our environmental justice efforts, like it provides an interesting opportunity for us to all like not just learn about these things, but also like deepen our openness to each other and to like hearing about each other's experiences. And then also like yeah, it's very interesting. Like on Thursday night, the school board had a meeting. I think they meet like once a month, and Parents for Palestine was there protesting the teacher who got fired. And also at the same school board meeting, the tax breaks were passed for Hilco that we have been protesting as being out of order and out of process. And so it was interesting to watch, like, there was all this power happening at that meeting, and like in the same news articles we were being like the process was also being mentioned. And you know, like the No Arena effort was at city council on Thursday, and we were at city council last Thursday, and like both of them were disruptive protests that we had. And so yeah, being able to like create this sort of cohesive narrative and sequence, I think like the corporations and the businesses have it down on figuring out what the cohesive narrative is, and their PR teams are really great. And I think it's an interesting like opportunity to figure out who we want to align ourselves with. And like I think there's definitely a challenge with the processes that Thrive is going through of like we're going through a community benefits agreement negotiation process, but there's it like we've made a decision to be like an outside effort in it because of some of the challenges we were having in the negotiation process. But then it creates these like this divide between us and other community groups. And so trying to figure out how we also want to like not just create a narrative where the movement of social justice groups are all together, but then also like that the groups in Grace Ferry are also like invested in being together, and not just like Hilco is connected with these community groups and Philly Thrive as, you know, an outside force, when we have these like relationships and we actually have like a shared vested interest in deep investment. And
And just to echo what Brooke said, you know, when it comes down to cleaning and greening, it really does benefit everyone involved, like literally everyone, across every socioeconomic status, every person regardless of color, ethnicity. If we really all adopted it and it was meant for all, if it was truly meant for every single one of us, it would benefit all of us in all the ways, in every way that you're speaking of, and every way that I'm speaking of, and the ones that you mentioned as well. And so you know, we can no longer have these caste systems that exist, you know, even now, that have existed, and it's you know, it's what our society has been built on. And in order for all of us to be great and do well, literally what most people would consider the least of these have to also be doing just as well as the high net worth people.
Yes, thank you so much. You both beautifully said how these issues are so interconnected, and the amount of solidarity that is necessary for thinking about these root causes of injustice as well. Ms. Carroll, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this?
No, everything's good. Everything's not good.
Great, thank you. So for my next question is about this element of storytelling and being able to control your narrative and tell your own story. A lot of what we have said, these are very fundamental things of, children deserve the right to health and safety environment. Everyone deserves a right to a safe and healthy environment. Things like food and soil health, solidarity with other issues like No Arena in Chinatown and Palestine. So these are all, it's very straightforward messaging, yet we've also seen how it can be extremely challenging to communicate and also maintain your narratives. So can you speak about some strategies of how you've been able to tell your story?
Yeah, I will say one strategy that I believe works extremely well. However, I don't think I've been successfully done it because it requires time and energy, and it basically is you become your own talk show host. What these social media platforms have allowed you to do is create your own platform in a sense, and that does require extra time and resources that I don't always have, quite honestly. And I do recall last year, or maybe earlier in this year, where I started this series of just like bringing up a topic each week, and I would come and I would, talk about something that I felt like was important, and that people would engage with and cared about. But it requires a lot of consistency to be what now that what I was working to do was content creation. To be a content creator is a complete job all by itself. And what I've done to build our social media platform is not that. That's just me organically, no pun intended, just really being natural on my page. And so I think it just does require, in order for us to control our narratives and be consistent and have the people that want to come and listen to you, you have to dedicate the time specifically to that, and that takes away from actually doing the work. Is what I've found, because like my work is outside. That's where I spend my work, is traveling to talk to people and meet with people. It's not always about having a camera in my face. So a majority of things that I felt like I've done even in the last 30 days are not even on my social media. And that's where the real work is getting done.
Thank you. Brooke, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely resonate with that. Like, I think, like, there's so much, we have maybe, like, 50 members in Philly Thrive, and, like, we're always having conversations, and then, you know, as Carol can definitely attest to, we're always in meetings, and, like, I think it's one of those things of, like, organizational culture that, like, how much are you committed to, like, taking a step back and sharing what you're learning about and, like, bringing other people into that fold, but also, like, you know, if, like, I think also to some extent all of the best work doesn't actually, like, it can stand on its own, and you don't need to, like, tout about it on social media in order for it to be true. Although, like, social media is, I think it's more helpful to think about social media as its own opportunity for work and not as opportunity for, like, sharing what you're doing. So, like, as you said, like, it is its own job to, like, share out all these thoughts and do transformational work in that realm, and not just be like, all right, like, here are, like, the 20 conversations that we had as an organization this week, because, like, those are their own, like, those conversations are going to keep going on and creating impacts. Yeah, but it's like, yeah, I think it's a thing that we struggle with, because there is so much to share about, and, like, even inside of our organization, like, there is a scarcity sense of, like, there's all these other things happening in the organization, how do I know about them? And so, like, we're still figuring out our internal communication structure, while also figuring out what we want to have people write about. And, like, you know, I think for us it's really easy when an environmental journalist comes to us and we're like, oh, you get it, like, this will be easy, like, we'll make this a priority, because, like, you're not going to get this wrong. And there are some journalists that we, like, actually should be really working hard to get their thoughts on us. Like, I think there are some journalists at the Inquirer who write about topics that are near and dear to Philly Thrivers' hearts, who would actually have a really important impact about the story that they wrote. Like, I've been thinking about, like Ellie Rushing writes a lot about gun violence, and I've been thinking about like all of the like grandmothers that die early because of environmental issues, who then like are the support system for their grandkid is gone, and that like the wave of impact that creates, and that would be a really great story to be written about, like the way that environmental issues are connected to gun violence. But like, I don't know if I actually have the time and effort to like go and pursue that, like convince Ellie Rushing to go write this story. So like there are some like environmental journalists who are like, they might as well be in Philly Thrive, and it's like, okay, like you can go write this, and maybe we're not going to get like top press for it, but also like people love to read environmental, like, you know, I don't know, there are lots of environmental journals out there.
Yeah, I think it's like the preaching to the choir idea, where I found that most true impact for me has now shifted from speaking into a room of people who already are, you know, with it, right? They're like, oh, we understand, we know it's important for us to know where our food comes from, for health, for air, for all the things, regenerative organic spaces, ag spaces. Like, that's wonderful and beautiful to be in a room of people talking to them about what they already know, or even if you're teaching them something new, you're not convincing them, right? But the impact really comes down to when you're in a room talking to a bunch of people who are in opposition of you in many different ways, and you're persuasive in your messaging and allowing them to at least understand why you have the point of view you do, even if they don't end up agreeing with you, but at least they understand why you're coming from where you are. And so I found myself to have more impact in those spaces, and I enjoyed those spaces too, where I am. And I get better too. We also get better at this, because this requires us to be advocates. Advocacy is work. Activism is work, and we have to improve upon that. We just aren't just because we exist. We are because we are actually out there doing the work, and we need to be met with opposition and met with people who don't agree, so that we can continue to sharpen our tools and our mental acuity towards what we're so passionate about, what we say we're passionate about, so we can truly, rah with fire, right? And so that's what I think of it when it comes down to really getting our messages out. And I love the idea of even I had a story recently or earlier this year in Politico, and that I found that was great to be talked for other journalists to have interest and even be able to get it pitched to their editor and published, to talk about agriculture, talk about farming and the importance of regenerative ag and all of that in a political publication is important, because then it crosses the lines, or you may not want an environmental journalist only to be speaking about these things, because the people that are used to reading Ellie's column are going to expect that from her and appreciate it. But what if somebody else in a completely different aspect, sports especially, I'm loving seeing these athletes talk about their eating journeys and why it's important for them to eat, plant-based and all of that, because that helps just change the perspective of what people are used to reading and give them something else to chew on.
Great. Thank you so much for giving those examples. I think you hit the nail on the head that it's really easy to get caught in these echo chambers where, like you said, it's really affirming to be around people who share these views and share these values, and also all the strategies that you just described to broaden your audience as well. Ms. Carroll, did you have any examples of storytelling in your work at Philly Thrive?
Oh, you talking to me?
Yes. I want
Everybody start looking around.
I'm sorry. About storytelling, if you have used any of the strategies that Krista just described about broadening your audience of who you're speaking to.
Well, it's true. For me, it's like I said a while back, you always can reach people doing stories, and you all can reach people by communication, by social media. You reach people through social media like Facebook, Instagram, places like that, TikTok. You reach people on what you're doing in your community, stuff like that there, because it's very important. I like the young lady said too. It's very important what you how you reach people. And to me, I like reaching people by social media. I do a lot of content on TikTok. I have over 10,000 followers. I'm at 10K follow on one of my platforms. On my platform, I at 6K followers. But it's good to reach people through communication. I like reaching people because and talking to people in person is good too. Talking to people in person too is good. Cause we always have a lot of meetings stuff like I told you I do a lot of meetings. And also too, I had mentioned that we do camps for young kids during the summertime. We help the kids in the summer but can't when the mothers go to work and the mothers do work in the summertime and they really don't have no place to send their kids to. Some people can't afford to send their kids to camp. So we have our own FarmerJawn has their own camp. Has their own camp they do.
That's incredible.
Yes, thank you. Let me share.
Thank you. And so you all brought up issues about personal capacity and organizational capacity to pursue additional media work because, as you've all said already, pursuing work on environmental issues, these are issues of survival, and that in itself is a full-time job in itself. And
Oh yeah, yes it is. The environmental work is a full-time job. You're fighting for clean air. I try to make sure the farm stays closed. The fight for fossil fuel and benzene is the clean. Because me, I have been going through this a lot. Ever since before FarmerJawn came into the area with the fossil fuel and the benzene. Because in my area where I live in Southfield, you can always know. Like I said, but you always know when you get the feeling. You can smell the air. When you come off that Jersey Bridge, you can smell the refinery, the air where it smells so bad. It smells worse than rotten egg. And sometimes in my community, we couldn't open up our windows. That's how bad it was back then. It was so bad. You couldn't open up your window. And a lot of people didn't have air conditioning back then. And you had to use your fan in your house, but you couldn't open up your window because the air was so bad, the fresh air was so bad from the refinery. But I'm just so glad that when FarmerJawn came in my area, when Alexa came into the area, because I've been with FarmerJawn, I say about since, well, I came in 2015, but I left, came back in 2017. 2017. What I like about it, they make sure the refinery had stayed closed, trying to keep the refinery closed because the refinery had exploded many a times. It exploded in the 90s, in the 80s, no, the 60s. In the 60s, when I was young, it had a little explosion. Then it came back in the 80s, exploded. It had a little small explosion in the 90s, but this one here was a big one. And I live right down the street from where it blew up at. This was a big one. Thank God nobody didn't lose no life. It was a young lady that worked in the refinery, was there to save everybody in this area. Because there could have been a mass, it would have been bad. It would have been a mass, the whole South Philly would have been gone on the side of 20 or 32nd Street. So it was a mess, a lot of cars come across the 76 would have been messed up. But I just think, that FarmerJawn came in. And I'm glad I met Brooke too. Glad I Brooke, he does a lot of she does a lot of work, she does. She's very, very smart, very intelligent young lady. So I appreciate her, and I appreciate her having me here, inviting me here today to speak. And I just want to thank you. And I enjoy what I do. I enjoy what I enjoy being in a lot of meetings. I enjoy being on the board. Yeah, I enjoy being in the high committee. I enjoy talking to people. And thank you again.
yes, thank you so
For giving all of those examples of these major challenges that Philly Thrive is having to manage on a day-to-day basis in your work.
Yes.
So because your day-to-day is filled with so many of these major challenges, again, issues of survival, I'm wondering what type of media support would best help your organizations and your personal capacities in pursuing that? Okay.
I'll start. Ms. Kara, did you want to start?
No, Brooke can start. You want to start?
Sure, Carol. Yeah, I mean, I think like we often call on allies to help, like, like action photos are super helpful, and we'll do different visual projects, different videos. We had one like coloring book that we did, and we've been working on our website for way too long. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the most helpful thing for an organization of our size that is like mostly volunteer run is trying to identify supporters to help with those kind of like small tasks that are very specialized in their skills, that like it doesn't make sense for us to hire a full-time photographer, but yeah, and like the press piece is something that I think like it feels like the cards are so stacked against us, and all of these business PR world people are just so good at it, and in this like effort that is sort of an us versus them world, that the it's just like so hard to figure out how to like win that battle. But so if people are press experts, like that's helpful to be taught how to do it, but it's also like I feel like the biggest thing with press is just asking reporters like how do I figure this out, you know?
Yeah, I think you can't expect impact from underfunded organizations, and that's really where it comes down to. It's with people who support organizations in verse, but not actually backing up with either with their own dollars or the dollars of their network. That to me is a problem. It's a major issue, and something that I've definitely experienced and still do, with having the capacity to do so much more, but being limited just simply by the funding opportunities, whether they be for nonprofit or for profit. There's so many different opportunities for funds, but in many ways, as an organization that is inner city based, we while one would think there's just so much out there, it is met with its own challenges, mainly technical assistance being one of them. A lot of the opportunities are really hard to even get or get close to because it's hard to demystify, and really break down and be able to have all of what's needed to actually even put your head in the race for the funding. So, yeah, I think that that's important to note, that for journalists, when they are writing pieces, and when they do approach us to say they want to talk about, to help put us, lift us up and lift our messaging up, the messaging really does need to come from a place of, if you really do care about this, like you say you do, then what are you doing to fund it? Because multinationals funding things, or it's not always going to go the way that we want it to go and that it needs to go, to really have true impact, so it can be felt, by, again, what many would consider the least of these. But what I found is that being a part of that group, being a part of growing up in the inner city, I'm from Germantown section of Philadelphia, and that community being of the lowest of health outcomes, being a part of that group of the folks that in the city that have the lowest of health outcomes, it's really important that the impact is really getting all the way down to them. And it's only but so much that small organizations like mine and like Philly Thrive can do on our own, especially if we've proven that we can have success and impact and we know how to steward dollars properly. Once we've already shown that, there's people that need to hop in, to really jump on board to help, and not just say that they love our work, because that's not enough. So yeah, I can't drive that home enough. Like, if you want something to stick and stay, fund it.
Thank you. Ms. Carroll?
Yeah, yes, it's important that we reach our community. That's really important that we reach people in the community, because a lot of people don't know. Some people know about different things we do in the community. Some people don't. some people, you know, in their houses and stuff like that. But it's good that we reach people in the community. That reach people in the community. And that's what we do a lot. We have things in the park, like Brooke was saying, we do different things inside the park. Well, we invite the community out. You know, we make phone calls. You know, we do phone, but we make phone calls. We do table, we do canvas and stuff, knock on doors and stuff. Where we can reach people in the community that, hey, this is what we doing here. We want to invite you out to this here, to this event. That we can know what's going on. Like right now, we doing pop thing called Pop the Hood, like that Pop the Hood. So like that we like slowing down just a little bit, not too much. But we had meetings where we could reach people, invite people to the meeting. Like we just eventually had a block party for people, environmental agency. We had a block party and for Philly Drive too. We had a block party where we invited people out and stuff like that. Yeah, like that in the community, so that you know this is what we doing. And we did fun things for the children, you know. For the young people, it's very important for the young and the old people. Definitely young for the old people, young, good for the old people too. But the young people is important too, and the old people. That way, that when we gone, they could take over. They could you know still take over what we doing. They could keep taking on because it's like a puzzle. We keep things putting together. We fighting for the CBA. We're still fighting for that. Right for the CBA community agreement. But you know, it's important that we do stuff in our community, that we reach the people in our community. Yeah, and things we do a lot for the job. We do a lot. Yeah, thank you for
Thank you so much. I now want to open the floor if there were any audience questions. Okay, I can give you the mic.
I had a question for you. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Krista.
Kristen? Okay.
Krista.
Krista, I had a question for you. You mentioned that you'd like more support from people who are like outside of the organization in a monetary form. How do you plan on preventing people who come with those funds from taking over and making their point of view on what you should be doing theirs instead of yours?
Oh, I don't accept everybody's money. So that's also a bigger thing. It's called discernment, and that's super important. And you mentioned this too, Brooke, like you can't align yourself with everybody. You do have to be very careful about who you're in alignment with, because if they truly care about the mission, especially if they came to me, then they understand what my mission is. They can't come and try to change it or divert it. And so that is not the dollars that I'm even remotely interested in accepting.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question.
Thank you. Another question?
Hey y'all, thanks for your time and energy sharing today. I was wondering about video content specifically, being a PhillyCAM member. I'm just curious like how you use video, the impact you've seen with it, any specific types of content that resonates with your audience, and also if video isn't it for you, like what type of content is working well and has the most impact for the audiences you're trying to reach.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't super had enough time to analyze how effective our content is on that realm, but I think like I try to use video to give people a chance to like witness some of the conversations that we're having to, like in between members, and so like this week I have a plan to make a video for people talking about how they can still smell bad air even though the refinery's closed. But yeah, I think it's like obviously in this moment like video is such a small videos are such a catching tool for engagement, and we've had 2 documentaries about our efforts, which are also really great opportunities to give people like a glimpse back in the work that we've done, and be like, yes, we haven't forgotten about like the refinery closure efforts because now we're like onto a new effort. But also like the documentary was like these Ithaca students' thesis, and they spent a crazy amount of hours on it. So it's not like something that I would just be like, oh, a volunteer, like you should do this. But it's a really good documentary. It just took a lot of time. Yeah, I think, and I have a hard time figuring out what, like, we do so much direct action and we have so many thoughts to share. So like, how do I discern like which actions I should just like post about really quick and then say we did it, versus like, okay, let me like accrue a bunch of media from it, including video, and then like go back and edit it afterwards and continue to return to it as important. So yeah, but I think like short videos are just going to continue to be trending as a important tool, and they're so helpful for movement work, for a chance to like use your own voice, and I think like people in movements have tendencies to just talk a lot and like say many words, and it's just so much easier to engage with it on video.
Yeah, I think there's great power in video, long form and short form. There is, I mean, you have to think that, YouTube, I think, is still like the top platform in many ways. And so with that does prove that long form videos still have a place, while short form is great. And I think it even traverses across the generations in a way too. Because if we think about like one of the top YouTubers like Kai Cenat, and like how popular he is, and that's very long form. Like those go on for hours and hours, where people are just watching and engaging. And then you also have a similar but different example of there's a wildlife reserve. And there's this woman that essentially is just running video always, similar to Twitch. I think she's on Twitch actually. And so people are just tapping in. People are watching people sleep. So there's so much happening, where I think long form definitely has a place and is beneficial. And short form is just what we do much more, simply because it's easier and it doesn't require as much time. But what I have noticed that I do like, and from our own page, which got a lot of traction, was I did spend time doing a podcast with someone that was 3 hours long, but then we broke it up in short pieces, and now we have content for that can span over time, and that gets a lot of engagement just from that, those hours that I spent doing it all at once. Now we can break it up, so I really appreciate the benefit of that too. But that long 3 hour podcast still lives on Apple Music and all the platforms for people who are interested in that. So I think it is important to be able to mix it up, and not just have one main way of communication when it comes to video. But video content is key and super important, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, so coming back to the videos and talking about the narrative, and because you have been a long time doing this, I'm wondering, which is, because it's an old topic, it's not new, but the new part maybe is the narrative. So I'm wondering if you have been seeing how you change your narrative in order to sell the same idea, but because it's new generations, it's young people, but also new children. So is anything that you have been working on the narrative that has changed? This is the first question. And the other question, also close to that, is you have mentioned it that you have been to work with journalists around those topics. And it's easy, as you said, when journalists already have this political position about the environment and take care of them. But what about the others that, as you mentioned it, in some spaces you have been with opposition thinkers, or, for example, try to catch the attention of all those journalists who maybe are in really important media. And when I say important, I'm talking about massive. But which is the tool that you use or that you have taste about how you can attract those who think differently in order to make a space for your ideas?
I think honestly, I don't try to attract those folks. I think just the fact that I'm not even opposing. I don't do a lot of opposition either. I just speak about what's important to me, and I think that is what actually ends up attracting them and gets me into different spaces and doors. Because what I haven't done, and I also think that is something I'd like to improve upon, is that I haven't put myself in rooms on purpose specifically. Like I don't do a lot of that. I work. I work, I do what I do, and then people come to me. And so, but I think that can only get you but so far, and it is important for me to take the other approach where we're more in the outreach, saying like, hey, I know this event is happening, this is happening, we need to have a space there. And that is the strategy for us going into the next seasons and continuing to move forward, because that's how we really get to push our mission. And because I think the importance of what we do is not just based in Philly, it's not just based nationally where people know who we are, but it is definitely an international conversation that's happening. And like, I want to get to COP. I want to be in those real climate conversations. I think the next one is in Geneva in Switzerland. Like, you know what I mean? That's where I want to be, talking about what matters and what's important. And to your first question, the narratives, I think that is difficult because, again, it goes back to not necessarily having all the funding in the world to be able to have that type of impact, or the diversity of narratives for different age groups and different generations. So you do have to hone in on who your target market is and which of that market will you have the greatest of impacts, and then really just go for that. While I have a certain passion for sure to work with the like school-based programming, and that is a part of one of our initiatives. That's not the forefront of my initiatives right now, because the people who are purchasing food are not 6 and 7 year olds that love the planet and want to talk about earthworms with me and all the stuff that I enjoyed sitting and doing with them. It is their parents. And so those are the people who they are going to make the health choices for that household, no matter how much a kid comes home saying that they want organic fruit, and it still comes down to the pocketbook and what the bottom line is. And so who I need to speak to is to the adults that are making these buying decisions, these consumers, and then I need to speak to the people, our policymakers who are making the laws around how the cost of our food and the cost of living. So that's really where I direct my attention. So it does come down to having to choose who you're going to speak to.
Yeah, I don't think Philly Thrive does a good job at targeting our narrative, because our narrative is constantly evolving, just because the context is constantly evolving. And we try to hone in on some consistent things to say, just because we should know what our angle is and stuff. But it is interesting, so for our gentrification housing work, when UC Townhomes was organizing, there was a specific conversation happening around housing and gentrification that is that became, once No Arena in Chinatown became an issue to discuss. It became a cohesive anti-development conversation that is continuing to trickle down. And so trying to figure out how to align yourself with the other conversations that are happening and engage people in that way was a big part of that. But also I feel like every week we get a new information about Hilco, and then we have to figure out
Right.
I think a lot of times we do a power map of who has influence on the thing and then who is aligned versus not aligned with us. And so we'll do 4 quadrants of that and put different people and different organizations on that list, and it helps us figure out who do we need to align ourselves with, and what's our relationship with these people that have power in this moment. And like, you know, a reporter asked me the other day, like, is Hilco your enemy in this? And I was like, that's definitely not the narrative we're going for. So, but yes, it's something that we're like always talking about as an organization, and so it's hard to like we're not talking about it as like who are we going to engage the most on it. We're talking about it as like what's our truth, and yeah, we operate on a sense of like if we give a clear presentation of who we are, like that's the most compelling narrative.
Thank you all for your amazing organizational work and the things you do and your messages. I just had a question about the future, about 2025 and beyond, and interdependence. So I know that, you know, we all kind of sometimes come into conversations, not sometimes, we come into conversations with our own biases, our own perspectives, our own worldview, the places we're from, people are, in large part, the places that they're from. How has conversations that you've had from the seat of the work that you do with people in other places, whether they were people upriver, you know, or in another city, how has that helped you be more efficient or effective in your organizing work and in you kind of reaching the goals? And then what are some of those goals that you have for 2025? So the first part is connectivity, like what's already worked, like what connections outside of Philadelphia have been like, you know what, oh wow, this could really be helpful for more than just me, let me bring this back. And then how has that strengthened up your even goal setting internally and propelled you forward into 25?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that question. I would certainly say, just as of late, some of the rooms that I've been in, and over this past year, and how it's allowed me to goal set for next year. Just a few weeks ago, I was invited to the White House to speak with with White House officials and USDA people in regards to, you know, the future of agriculture and what does that look like. And I really do come from the mindset and understanding that all the difficulties and struggles that I've had in my own work, and I understand where the USDA is meant to benefit the farmer. And most of the farms across the nation are directly funded by the USDA and FSA, which is the Farm Service Agency, an entity under USDA. And I recognize that FarmerJawn has never been. That's not something we've ever even pursued until this year. And so understanding and recognizing the difficulties that I've had, it was very reminiscent of a lot of the stories that I've heard and been told in regards to the systemic oppression of other farmers of color. And so recognizing that it's not enough for the USDA to say, we recognize that we have been, not always fair in the past, and this is but then what are we doing to change that? What happens next? So I'm definitely happy that I've been able to be a part of the conversations that is stating what will happen next in that space when it comes to not just farmers of color, but how are we benefiting all farmers? Because the truth of the matter is there are a huge surge of young farmers that are coming into this space, regardless of background or color. Just young people who have an understanding that the way that we've been doing things for all this time, growing food, taking care of the land, can no longer be. And I love that energy of this newest generation that's coming up and saying this, like they have something to fight for. And so my job as, I'm 36. So my job for them is to support, I'm in the middle because there's the 65-year-old farmers who are retiring. And then there's the millennials in the middle, which are not as many kids of farmers as it used to be. That used to be the generation that people would pass their farm down to kids. You can't do that anymore. And then you have the youngers. So I recognize that young people need somebody that understands the difficulties so that they don't have to go through it as they're trying to become farmers. And that's the change I'm trying to put forward. I also recognize that single women are also having extreme difficulty in this space, not just in agriculture, but I mean, just in general in life, but also in the outdoors, in the fight to destigmatize the outdoors. And the same thing with Black and brown folks. So those are the three main buckets of types of people that I am seeking to, my goals, the goal sets that I have are to impact them very specifically. And I believe that that is what's going to change for the better of all of us, because it really does come back to that. And when I am speaking to companies and corporations and getting them to understand my perspective and point of view, it's not always best to go forward with having that the opposite mindset. Like, you want to find a commonality, because that's how deals get done at the end of the day, is you have to find a common ground that benefits that organization, regardless of how much they say, like, we want to be helpful, and it has to benefit them. They want to be able to promote it. It has to make them look good. And I recognize that. So that's where alignment comes into play, like making sure that this is a place that truly wants to be in alignment, and they benefit from just getting the kudos from doing it, but at least their dollars, I get to steward their dollars how I'd like to, how I see fit. So some of the goals that I have for next year, I mentioned, like just traveling outside of the nation, doing more of having the conversations with folks who are like-minded as me, and really coming to the table, if not creating the table, where we're actually seeing what matters to us come to fruition into this world.
Love that. Yeah, I think personally, I mean, I can't speak for Thrive as a total organization, but personally, some of the connections that are most exciting for me are other groups in other cities that are doing the same thing. And I've met a couple in Richmond, California, and in Chicago, and just like very like galvanizing to hear people be angry about the same things and connect about that, and say like in Chicago, like Hilco can't go anywhere without people being like, wait, aren't you guys the guys who screwed everything up? So like that's very empowering to hear about, and really makes me like hopeful in my anger. And yeah, I mean, I would love to see an $80 million CBA in 2025, but
Yes.
I don't know, Carol, if you want to speak about some dreams you have for the future for Philly Thrive. And
Well, like I was saying before, we're trying to get a CBA agreement, which is important to get that CBA agreement. We did a lot of for keep people in their homes. Like I said before, keep people in their home. We did clean air, for clean air in our community, stuff like that. We did for clean air in our community. And I just agree with everything that Brooke just said. So I ain't gonna talk over that one. I just agree with everything that he said. He said a mouthful for us. We do a lot in the community. We try to reach people in the community. We do a lot in our community, a lot. Now in the community, we do a lot in other communities too. Like for CC Town Home, we fought to keep them in their homes. We fought for them to stay in their home. We fought for Chinatown. We want to see how for Chinatown. We have a shirt. First me and my best friend don't have the shirt yet. We did ask for no arena. Then went to build no arena in City. And I found out yesterday from my grandson. My grandson told me that the Seven Sisters had their own arena, but he don't know why they want to move to in town. Why they trying to move in town? I didn't know that. I didn't know. I thought they wanted to move in town, be closer. But he said he don't know why, because they had their own stadium. Everybody had their own stadium. 76 had their own stadium. Eagles had their own stadium, and also the other ones too had their own stadium. Baseball teams all had their own stadium. Everybody had their own stadium. My thing is, we do a lot in the community. We just do a lot. We reach everybody, reach people, invite people out to our events that we have at our thing. And that at the end of every year we do an end of year party. If you have anybody that's not in the community, you invite them to come to the end of the year party. There's any families or friends like that. So we do a lot. We do a lot in reaching people and do a lot in communication too. But like I said, Brooke, he said a lot, so I'm not gonna say no more. Thanks for letting me share. Brooke hit everything on the nose.
And Rose, I'll just add one more piece to the question that you had, David, is that an ultimate goal for 2025 and beyond is certainly collaboration. Like figuring out the science and the essence and the finesse of collaboration, because it's not always easy. And collaborating is not always, you have to do that at every level. Wherever you see your organization, you need to be collaborating with organizations that are smaller than you, just the same size as you, and larger than you. And that having that mix is really important, and that does lead to the impact, because that can also help with the lack of funding for whichever organization that may be stronger.
Thank you so much for adding that piece about collaboration, because I think it's the perfect way to close out this discussion that I hope that we continue having after this panel is over about ways that we can continue collaborating and supporting the work that you're doing. So thank you all three of you so much for taking the time today to share your expertise and have this discussion today. Thank you so much.
Also too, before you go, look, I do like fight for climate change too. I have an organization for climate change too. To not only I'm in Philly Drive, I'm an Eastern service worker. And Eastern service workers fight for women's right to work. We fight for women's right. I've been with them since 1976. I was just 24 years old back then. So they on South Street, so they do a lot too. And it's important for climate change. That's why we fight for that. Right to air to breathe, by right to breathe air campaign. And we also do talk about climate change for our organization. Thanks for letting me share.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're so grateful for the expertise that you've brought today and those experiences. Thank you, David, from the Sally Black Foundation, for organizing the session, and all of the wonderful people at PhillyCAM who are hosting us today. So I hope that you've enjoyed the session and you have some time later today to go to the other panels. Thank you.